Historians of Reddit. What's a devastating event that no one talks about? This is fairly recent, started in 1998 and ended in 2003 with the Second Congo War. It's the deadliest conflict since World War II, with about 5.4 million deaths, a vast majority of them due to malnutrition and disease. Galveston, Texas was once considered to be one of the most important commercial ports in the United States and was referred to by several fantastical names such as the Queen City of the Gulf and the Wall Street of the West. All that changed when it suffered a near-direct hit from a devastating Category 4 hurricane in 1900. The deadliest natural disaster in American history. Pretty much the entire city was destroyed by a storm surge, and anywhere from 8,000 to 12,000 people died. Galveston was rebuilt, but it never truly regained its status. Houston became the state's commercial center in the storm's wake, in addition to other factors. One thing that doesn't get talked about was more of a phenomenon or major problem than event. And that was how many people died in theater fires due to poor design, combustible materials, few fire exits, and panic. One of the worst was the Iroquois Theater in Chicago 1903, which is both the deadliest theater fire and the deadliest single-building fire in U.S. history, where patrons died after sparks from an arc light set a curtain on fire. Then a chain reaction started, exacerbated by failures of the things in place that were supposed to combat fire. The theater had been overbooked to compensate for earlier poor sales, causing some to sit blocking the exits. The fire was immediately worsened when performers opened the stage door to get outside, as it turned the fire into a fireball. Many people were held inside by iron gates that had been put in place to prevent people from sneaking in without paying. As people fled, they tumbled downstairs, trampled each other, and got squashed to death. Their unfamiliarity with the building got them stuck in dead ends and up against windows. Many jumped from fire escapes and died, while those behind them were saved, the bodies of the earlier jumpers cushioning their falls. All in all, 602 people died. Many were children. The story is a lot more complicated and sordid, with city corruption, etc. The one takeaway is the incident promoted the development and use of the panic bar. Ad. Sorry, this is so poorly written. I was trying to write it really fast on my phone. Ad. Thanks to everyone who is providing more stories and info for me to look at. I love it. Cambodian genocide. They killed so many kids that the life expectancy was 18. There's so many that I would go with that will probably be mentioned in other comments, but I think any stories about workers in the early 1900s are pretty horrible. Radium Girls is a pretty horrible event, for example. After being told that the paint was harmless, the women in each facility ingested deadly amounts of radium after being instructed to point their brushes on their lips in order to give them a fine tip. Some also painted their fingernails, face and teeth with the glowing substance. The women were instructed to point their brushes in this way because using rags or a water rinse caused them to use more time in the material, as the rinse was made from powdered radium, gum arabic and water. Many women died and became sick with horrendous diseases. One woman named Molly Maggie had her jawbone crumble. You can read about that here. By May. Her dentist thought Molly needed surgery to remove a fast-growing abscess he'd found on her jaw. When he got the gums open, the bone didn't look right as it was too ashy and gray. So he gently prodded it with his finger. To his shock and horror, the whole bone crumbled under his fingertip like ashes in a fireplace. Instead of removing a tumor, he wound up digging Molly's entire left jaw out with nothing but his fingers. Unbeknownst to him, the radium had perforated the bone cells and stripped them of calcium. It had, like a little machine gun, shredded the collagen inside the bone and left it as little more than a pile of splinters. There's also a great book on this called The Radium Girls: The Dark Story of American Shining Women by Kate Moore. This whole story is extremely depressing. Work in the 1800s and early 1900s was pretty horrible for a lot of women, men and children. Brew wenches, female miners in the 19th century, you can look that up. Children in chimney sweeps, etc. In 535, humans went through hell. Many reported a strange color in the skies. Not just in Europe. A dense, dry fog was also reported in Asia and the Middle East. Even the regions, now known as the Americas, weren't spared. E.g. drought in Peru. Temperatures were rather low in some places. It snowed either in the summertime. One survivor, a Roman politician named Cassiodorus, explained about the bluish sun and no shadows being cast, even in the noon. It has been hypothesized that Iceland holds the reason for the events between the years 535 and 536. Iceland is known for its volcanoes, and it was possible one such was to blame. Undefined. Leprosy colonies of Hawaii. People who were diagnosed with leprosy were forcibly banished to Kalaupapa to live out the rest of their lives. They were dug graves, had to stand in them, while their families and friends basically had a living funeral for them where they had the dirt thrown on them. They were then pronounced dead to the world and no longer part of the community. This continued through 1969 even after Hawaii officially became a state. Undefined. The Bronze Age collapse. Arguably more devastating than the fall of the West Roman Empire. So much knowledge lost. Truly one of history's great mysteries. I recommend reading up on it. It's really interesting. The disease outbreaks that hit the Americas with the arrival of the Europeans. You hear about a 90% death rate and it sounds made up. But whatever the actual number was, entire civilizations were literally wiped out. Cultures that had existed for thousands of years are just gone, with barely a record left. You have stories of people coming across whole villages of corpses. These people died never even having seen the Europeans, never knowing what was killing them and their loved ones and totally helpless to do anything about it.